Hey guys, I'm Estelle and I'm presenting on regenerative agriculture. Regenerative agriculture is a farming practice that restores degraded land and increases biodiversity while enriching soils, improving watersheds, and enhancing ecosystems. Farmers accomplish this by implementing crop rotation, using conservational tillage, and using no to minimal pesticides or synthetic fertilizers. So farmers basically move away from a very heavy industrialized way of farming and instead let nature run its course. And the purpose of regenerative agriculture is to improve the soil health by restoring its carbon content, which in turn improves our climate, our personal health, social injustices, and finances. So, in order to fully understand and appreciate regenerative agriculture, it's important to have some basic knowledge regarding conventional agriculture. So, basically, conventional agriculture treats soil as a medium to which fertilizers or chemicals are added. So, conventional farming relies on plowing, tilling, using herbicides to clear off weeds, and pesticides to prevent insects. So it's basically the opposite of regenerative agriculture. And this plowing and tilling releases carbon from the soil instead of capturing it. And so, like, the science behind this is that the life within it decays quickly and carbon is emitted. So in conventional agriculture, seeds, synthetic fertilizers, and pesticides go into the ground and then our food comes out. The process is almost imitates when food is cheaply manufactured using fillers or additives, which result in damage of our personal health. But in this case, the damage is not only to our health, but it's to the soil, to the water, insects, and our greater climate. So just like when we don't provide nourishment to our bodies and we get sick, by not providing nourishment to the soil, it slowly dies. And now on to what these practices actually look like. So conservational tillage is the first aspect. And so plowing and tillage dramatically erode soil and release large amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, as I mentioned. This can result in the kind of bare or compacted soil that creates a hostile environment for important soil microbes. And it kind of looks like the soil to the right of the picture. So by adapting to low or no-till practices, farmers minimize physical disturbances of the soil and over time increase levels of organic soil matter, which creates healthier and more resilient environments for plants to thrive in. And then another aspect is diversity and diversifying the plants. So the different plants release different carbohydrates through their roots, and to which of these various microbes feed on the carbs and return all sorts of nutrients back to the plant and to the soil. So when you increase the plant diversity of the field, the farmers help create more rich, varied, nutrient-dense soils, which leads to a better yield. And another aspect is rotation and cover crops. So rotation is crucial, as if the plants are planted in the same location, there's going to be a buildup of nutrients, or the opposite, there's not going to be any nutrients in the plant. And it's also crucial, as when the soil is left bare, it will erode, or the nutrients that are essential for growth will dry out or wash away. So by rotating the crops, there's more nutrients and more organic soil matter left. And as for the cover crops, they essentially crowd out the weeds. So that's just better for plant health and yield again. So it's important to remember that bare soil equals bad soil. And then on to the last aspect, which is planned grazing. So planned or rotational grazing of grasses mimics the patterns of animal herds, which ensures the land is not overgrazed. And then also using cows to graze the grasses. Their manure basically fertilizes the soil, and that also locks in the carbon. And not only does this help the ecosystem and the soil, but it's also a much healthier way for the animal too. So one of the main benefits of regenerative agriculture is how it helps combat climate change. As I previously mentioned, regenerative agriculture captures the carbon into the soil by drawing it out of the atmosphere. And as you know, we have an issue with CO2 in our atmosphere. And in agriculture, land is pretty much responsible for 25% of all of the global carbon emissions. So by adapting to regenerative agriculture, we could limit a lot of emissions. And then Drawdown offered a pretty interesting statistic that over the past centuries, 50% of the carbon in the Earth's soil has been released, and that equals to about 80 billion tons, which is pretty crazy. So regenerative agriculture is also important for social injustices. The world cannot be fed until the soil is fed. There's been a long common belief that the world cannot be fed without using chemicals or synthetic fertilizers, which is why there's been a spike in GMOs, since they supposedly increase yield since the crop becomes tolerant to chemicals that kill the insects and weed threats. And I say threats because with regenerative agriculture and by using cover crops, we can crowd out weeds, and since nourished plants are more pest resistant, there's not really a need for chemicals. Anyways, considering that we only have 60 more harvests left with conventional farming, it's pretty easy to argue that this belief of using chemicals and fertilizers doesn't hold up. And this also becomes a social injustice, as food that comes from regenerative farms is often organic and thereby is more expensive and not accessible to all individuals. And also, by using regenerative agriculture, it's fairer to the workers, as often they are forced to work with chemicals that can increase their chance of diseases. And then on to personal health and the importance of using regenerative agriculture. So as many of you probably learned if you watched the Kiss the Ground documentary, conventional farming uses tons of fertilizers and pesticides that come from post-war chemicals. So these chemicals have the power to quickly kill off insects and weeds and slowly kills our soil. Imagine the health implications these chemicals have on our health. Not only this, but by adapting to regenerative agriculture, our food is more dense and packed with nutrients that are otherwise conventionally stripped away. There are also some financial benefits of regenerative agriculture. There's also some challenges, such as when or conventional farming usually gets more government subsidies, so that's a challenge, but the overall return is very promising of using regenerative agriculture. So for instance, by ensuring good soil health, crops are more protected from extreme weather and create bigger annual yields for farmers. Also, farmers are spending excessive amounts of money on fertilizers and pesticides when they do conventional farming. And one farmer in Arkansas actually said that his farm was spraying themselves broke just to fight this weed. And their case showed that just by adapting to regenerative farming, they could save their farm financially. And then finally, regenerative farming prevents soil erosion and water depletion that currently costs $37 billion in the US and $400 billion globally. And 96% of food comes from this production. So there is hope, and companies are starting to actually adapt to regenerative practices, such as the company General Mills, which announced this past spring that it was going to apply regenerative agriculture to 1 million acres by 2030. And considering that 50% of their greenhouse gas emissions come from agriculture, that would be pretty significant change and help our environment and hopefully inspire more companies to take action. So there definitely needs to be more laws and regulations, or at least incentives to limiting tilling, chemicals, pesticides, etc. However, there is hope. And to me, this has just showed how we have overcomplicated things in order to increase production and yields. However, in doing so, we have created so many problems that could easily be fixed by simply going back to following nature's natural process. And finally, we have the questions. So my questions to you are, how can you support regenerative agriculture as a consumer? And then why do you think we adapted to conventional farming when it creates so many issues? Do you think there should be laws against destructive farming processes such as tilling and pesticide use? And finally, do you see any potential challenges by regenerative agriculture, and if so, why? Thank you.